And now we are joined by NFL draft expert Mike Renner. And before I get started, Mike, I got to tell the story to the people about how we actually met and how we know each other, which I think is a funny story. As some of you might know, some of you might not, as well as being an NFL football player, I was on a reality TV show called The Bachelorette. And one of the first guys I see come in the mansion when I got out the limo in the house on The Bachelorette was Mike Renner, who then worked for Pro Football Focus. And I wasn't very happy with the grades he was giving me back in the day, which is fine. We haven't talked about it yet, Mike. But yeah, I remember what you guys used to grade me. But met him on The Bachelorette. And if you're ever wondering, if you ever watched the show, what the guy is up to that brought the cardboard cutout of the girl's ex-boyfriend in the house, this is him right here. So, Mike, good to have you on, man. Appreciate you joining.
That's a different guy altogether now. That guy was 6 years ago me. I don't think you can hold that against me. That was a different person altogether, I think. But no, dude, that was wild. And it's wild they were here now, 6 years later.
I know.
Talking about the NFL draft.
Absolutely. You had a lot more hair back then. You used to have the flow. And
this is the longest I've had it since then, honestly. So I just cut it 2020. And I've never looked back. I was so done.
No, I'm actually going through a moment where I actually have a little bit of hair. Obviously, I never had much before. But let's jump right into it. You probably know the first question that everybody wants to know, and it's the one on everybody's mind. And obviously, after trading Justin Fields, it's a foregone conclusion. The Bears are drafting Caleb Williams. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that is the case. How does he fit in Chicago, and can he live up to all that hype?
I don't know if he can live up to all the hype in terms of where some people are putting him. I saw GM Rick Spielman say that he's a better prospect than Andrew Luck. It's like we could pump the brakes on that. I think there are things to his game that he's definitely not as NFL ready as guys like Joe Burrow, guys like Andrew Luck that we've seen in recent years. But his ceiling is absurd. And that's why you're drafting him number one overall, is because in the NFL nowadays, you want either to win the Powerball lottery or you want to have that Powerball lottery ticket, right? Like you want the highest of the high at the quarterback position, or you want that number one overall pick, or that guy in the rookie contract that can get you to a high enough place to get you there, because it's just the nature of the beast nowadays that to beat Patrick Mahomes, to beat Joe Burrow, to beat the best of the best, if you just have a Justin Fields who's just okay, you have to put a perfect roster around him. And so I do think that Caleb Williams at least is going to be an upgrade in a number of ways from Justin Fields, and has the potential that Fields really never had in a number of ways as well.
So what would you say are Caleb Williams' biggest weaknesses as you watch the film?
It's a great question. I think his biggest weaknesses on film, the one that really stands out to me that I worry about is his ability to stick with the timing of the progression past the first read. First read, things are good. First read's there. He's awesome. His technique's great. Footwork's amazing. There's really nothing to complain about. He is as accurate as it gets in this draft class on those throws. Really doesn't miss almost any of those. So if you got talent around him that gets open, he's going to go to town. But it's that second, having to get past that first guy, keep your footwork, keep the timing. You just see him get loose. It turns into, and a lot of guys, almost some guys learn this at the next level. Some guys don't. Some guys are Zach Wilson. It turns into, it's all on me. It turns into, I have to make the play then. And that's a little bit what I worry about. Now, some of that also is USC's offense. USC was not a pro-style offense by any means. They did not have a good offensive line this past year. In fact, it was awful. You go back to 2 years ago, he did it more. But I just worry about him putting too much on himself too early, and then what that will do could do to his confidence and his career progression. But so I hope the Bears really he has to be eased in more so than maybe you would think with how he's getting talked about as this number one overall pick.
Yeah, and to me, looking at the situation he's coming into, I can't remember a situation for a number one overall pick quarterback, maybe even top 5 overall pick, that is better than what the Bears have right now. What is your take on that? Do you think as I do, like looking, obviously you got Keenan Allen, you got DJ Moore, you could use a third receiver. Maybe they go Rome Odunze. Maybe they find an offensive tackle. If it's not Joe Alt, maybe it's Olu Fashanu. Maybe it's JC Latham. Maybe you find someone there. But then you got a solid defense. Defense was top 6 the last 6 games of the year. Definitely could be a top 10 defense with Montez Sweat. And you have playmakers at every level of that defense with TJ Edwards. He had a great year. And then you go to the defensive backfield. Brisker got better. You got some solid cornerbacks. So overall, with the addition of a solid running game, DeAndre Swift, it has to be a pretty good situation for him. Do you see it like that? Do you think this is probably one of the best situations for a number 1 overall pick that you can think of?
It has to be. And it's because this is one of the first times that the team shouldn't have been drafting number 1 overall that is, right? And they also didn't have to give up any of this year's draft capital or future draft capital to get this number 1 overall pick, like we've seen in years past, like when the Rams had to move up to number 1 overall. It's just a team that not only is good now, but they have pieces to then build around him in this year's draft. Like they could realistically get a number 1 wide receiver also at pick number 9 overall, or like you mentioned, a franchise left tackle to pair with him at number 9 overall. So it's a unique situation that you have to be happy as heck about as a Bears fan. And Ryan Poles, I've been critical of a lot of his moves, but the trade he pulled off last year to get a haul for that number 1 overall pick was an all-timer, truly. And it's going to go down in history because even regardless of what Caleb Williams does as a pro. So yeah, it's unique, and it's definitely a situation. That's why I was banging the table for saying, do we trade that and build around Justin Fields? It's like, no, man, you have this insane window that is years 2 through 4 on the rookie contract of whoever you draft number 1 overall if you do move on from Justin Fields.
I'll be honest, I was one of the guys that was open to keeping Justin. And here was my thought is, yes, you're going to have to pay Justin eventually, but you look at some of these contracts. I mean, these receivers, these offensive tackles. My thought was this. You trade down a couple of slots, you still get a Marvin Harrison Jr., and you probably be able to load up 2 1s, 3 2s, maybe 3 1s, 3 2s. Like you could have loaded up on so many players, and obviously you have to pay the quarterback. But my thought was you get all these other guys on the rookie contract and you get them with the 5th-year option, and financially it would actually kind of even out. And you would have so many more players to put around Justin Fields that it wasn't a slam dunk to just go and say, hey, yeah, we want Caleb Williams. My thought was it was Caleb Williams versus Justin Fields and 2 1s, 3 2s, 4 3s, whatever you could get for him. So what is your thoughts on that perspective?
So it was definitely an option in terms of if you really believed in Justin Fields, if you knew for a fact the next step was going to drop here and the next shoe was going to drop here. But I do think that, you could put a Pro Bowl roster around, let's say, Baker Mayfield. He ain't going to play like Patrick Mahomes, right? He ain't going to play like Patrick Mahomes with an average supporting cast. It just isn't going to work. So there's kind of a limiting reagent here at quarterbacks. No matter how much talent you put around them, if they don't have the goods that, Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, the top have, you ain't going to play at that level. So I do think that's why you have to take a chance on a guy who could play at that level. And if it was a different quarterback class, yeah, I think you could have made it easily a different situation. If this was 2022, I would have been trading back in a heartbeat. But it's not 2022. It's a unique quarterback class that gives a guy at the top that even if you don't hit on any other pick in this year's draft, could still take you to the top of the NFC North for, the foreseeable future.
No, yeah. And now that I look at it and I see how things worked out, I like it. I'm looking forward to Caleb. You still got that 9th pick. You could trade back if you want to, because there still are some needs on this Bears roster, man. What do you see as the top needs there? Obviously, rusher, 3 technique. You're putting a lot on Gervin Dexter's plate. You could probably use some depth on the offensive line. What do you see as the list of needs here? What do you rank the top 3?
Yeah, I do think that I would still like a left tackle. I still do think that despite how good Braxton Jones looked early on in his career, you would prefer to have kind of bookend lockdown tackles for a guy like Caleb Williams. Now, his rushing ability and his pocket movement can mitigate that to a degree, so it's not a massive need, but I still would like a left tackle if I'm looking along this offensive line. I still would like another wide receiver in the mix. Keenan Allen is a one-year deal. It's not, no one's winning a Super Bowl in your rookie year. That just never has happened before in the NFL. So you have to have some forward thinkingness to this draft. And in such a unique wide receiver class, I'm trying to take advantage of it. And then I think you hit the nail on the head. Defensive line, you are probably, 3 defensive linemen in terms of edge and defensive tackles away from competing with the cream of the crop in the NFL, like the Eagles along their front four. It's just those teams that really can bring pressure. They can't just send Juan Montez Sweat out there every single snap. It's like when they have 6, 7 guys that all can get after the passer. Those are what you want in today's NFL. And again, the Bears, even if they hit on those DTs they drafted last year, it's still a need to add some depth to that front four.
Yeah, I go back and forth between this, right? So I think that Eberflus, you got back in 2021, you got your first 2 picks were defensive players. You got Kyler Gordon, you got Brisker. You spent big last year on defensive linebackers. You had Edmonds and you have Edwards. You got Montez Sweat. So as a defensive coach, you got to put this together. Now we got to start investing into offense. A part of me says that, but then a part of me says we put a defensive tackle 3 technique on that defensive line, another one. If you put an edge across from Montez Sweat, now you're going to have 2 one-on-ones up front pretty much every play, unless they're doing a max tight protect or a couple of chips here and there. That's going to make your defensive line much better, and you can consistently be a top 10 defense. But like you said, now you have Caleb Williams coming in here. Keenan Allen, 32 years. Last year, there was one wide receiver in the NFL that had over 500 receiving yards at 32 or older, and that was Adam Thielen. So I like Keenan Allen. He hasn't shown he's slowing down. He's a hardworking guy from all indications, everything I've heard from people that I know. Love the guy, but he is getting older. He's on a 1-year deal. Like you said, forward thinking. If Rome Odunze's there, do you go there and then tackle Joe Alt? I'd go right now if Joe Alt's going to be there. Obviously, he's a Notre Dame guy. You're from Notre Dame. I know you like him. And he was a former tight end. So obviously, he's a freak athlete because all tight ends are freak athletes, So to me, I'm going back and forth between the biggest need and where I'd like to see him go. But give me your best case scenario and your worst case scenario for the Bears at the 9th pick. What's the best thing that could happen, the best players available, and then what's the worst case scenario, worst thing that could happen?
I don't really see a worst case scenario. It's the great sort of situation the Bears are in with this draft class. It's just, again, I keep hammering that the top of this class is unique. I think the best case scenario is Rome Odunze falling there because that's a guy that doesn't come along every draft, right? I think that's a number 1 type of wide receiver. And then, you got 2 number 1s wide receivers. No one's going to complain about having 2 number 1 wide receivers in Caleb Williams, right? You immediately
you got 3. We talking about DJ Moore. Keenan Allen.
Well, I was including Keenan Allen there. Me and Keenan Allen have the exact same birthday. We were born the same day. I know how I'm feeling at age 33. Or about to be 34, and it ain't the same. But just having 2 for him for the foreseeable future, I think is what I want. It's an arms race in today's NFL to get to the top. That's what I look for. But even if if Joe Alt fell there, that's a franchise left tackle. I think Oluf Fashion is a franchise left tackle too, and a guy who could even be a better pass protector at the next level than Joe Alt. And then defensive line, Dallas Turner's on the board. That's a no-brainer to go across from Montez Sweat. Byron Murphy on the board, the Texas DT. I love him. I think that's exactly what Eberflus' defense has been missing his entire tenure there in Chicago. That would be a slam dunk of a pick. So any of those 4, and again, one of those 4 will certainly be on the board when come pick 9. Any of those 4, and the Bears are sitting pretty. It's the bust rate for any of those guys is so low, in my opinion, that they're just going to get a darn good player. So worst case scenario, I don't know if there is one.
Yeah, no, I like that answer, and I agree with you. To me, edge is it's in this draft class, it's very interesting because obviously you got Latu, who I think's excellent. To me, when I watch the film, I go, that's probably the guy that I don't want to block the most, right? I don't want to block him. The guy's got so many moves. He's one of those slippery guys that are just tough to block. And I know as a tight end, when I watch the film, that's how I always watch tape. Okay, that's a guy that I want help with him. I'm sorry. And then Dallas Turner. Man, that guy's got to get off. He's a freak athlete. This guy can just get off the ball. And Jared Verse, big guy. He is bringing it all game. Long guy. He's strong. And you're not going to be able to take a play off. So for me, I'm going back and forth between the big three. And obviously you work your way down. You got Chop Robinson. But rank the top 3 or 4 edge rushers in this draft class, because a lot of people will say for the Bears, that is their number one need. Where do you see these guys falling?
Yeah, I think all those 3 are top 20 picks when all is said and done, because there's really no tier 2 in this edge class. There kind of is, but it's a big gap in those tiers. So those 3, I see it as Dallas Turner 1, just because of what he could be. I don't think he's right now the best of those 3. I think he may even be actually the worst of those 3 in terms of like on-field performance at this very moment. But that is what the 6'2" with 34-inch arms and a 4.46 40. That's what the cream of the crop at the edge rushing position looks like. And so won't take him much in the way of skill development to get him to that point. Latu is he's my number 2. He's just a ready-made pass rusher. You said he's the guy least likely to block, and I can't agree with that more, because if you miss him, if he gets your hands on one of those like high swipes, you're gonna be whiffing and then clapping at the end of the play, right? It's just that's how he does.
Look out!
Exactly. Someone's getting a free runner, unfortunately. So he is just so talented, and uniquely so in that he should not have been in college for 5 years, but because of his medical history, he just got way more skill development at the collegiate level than most prospects do. And then Verse, I think, is a little stiffer, not really a bend the edge guy, but him across from Montez Sweat would just be 2 guys who can collapse pockets, snap after snap after snap against opposing OTs. So there's no really going wrong of those 3. I just think from a ceiling perspective, it goes Turner, Latu, and then Verse. So that's how I have them ranked.
Okay, so I'm going to pull up this list for you, and the list is the draft attendees, right? Of this list of players, who do you think is the most likely to fall into the second round, to be the guy that's sitting there? Obviously, Will Levis, you remember, he was a guy that had to wait to this first pick of the second round. He was there to get his name called. And it's funny because his girlfriend kind of blew up there with the airtime.
She goes to my gym actually now.
Oh, no way. What gym is that? No, I'm just teasing. I'm going to have to show up there with a cutoff shirt. I'll start right here. We got Terrion Arnold, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., J.C. Latham, Latu, still know how to say his name right, Drake May, Quinyon Mitchell. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, loved him. Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Darius Robinson, Brian Thomas Jr., Dallas Turner, and Caleb Williams. Of that group, and I feel like they invited less this year than they usually do.
Yeah.
But of that group, is there anyone even in danger of sitting there twiddling their thumbs on Thursday?
I do think Darius Robinson is the closest to the fringe of the first round. Now, again, like I talked about how weak this edge class is, and it's just, I like the 3 at the top. I like Chop Robinson, the Penn State edge, as a prospect, and I like Darius Robinson as kind of like an every down run defender, maybe never a high-end pass rusher, but I like those 5 guys. I think they will be NFL players. After that, it's such slim pickings that those 5 may all go in the first round, and then you might see 1 guy in the second round in this edge class. It's just so thin after that. So I still think he probably sneaks in because of that, but he's the one sitting on the edge. The rest of those, I'm trying to think who could even slip outside the top 20. I don't think any of them do. I think the rest of those, there's no one, pulling Aaron Rodgers or Will Levis sitting there, camera showing them in the green room. Everyone else is going to go high off of that list, I would imagine.
No, honestly, completely agree. I thought maybe Brian Thomas Jr., but I don't think he could slip. Just because there's so much depth at that receiver. You got guys like Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Leggett. There's so many guys that people see as like anywhere from the late first to third round in this draft, which is pretty crazy.
No, it's definitely part of the conversation, especially in like the top 15, where you're like, hey, I have a pick 40, I'm drafted 10, I have picked 42. do I want a wide receiver now when, man, I can get maybe an easy number 2 wide receiver at pick 40 still? So it's definitely going to factor in the conversation. I don't think it factors in with those top 3 guys, though. When Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze are sitting there, you're not saying, oh, I can get another guy in a second. You're saying, no, I just got a chance to get an insane prospect. So it doesn't factor in with those guys. But I could see that with Brian Thomas. I could see him slipping, early 20s, but he ain't falling out in the first round altogether. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Who's your best of the rest right there? Like the second round guys, maybe late first, talking like McConkey, Leggett, A.D. Mitchell,
I like Adonai Mitchell a lot, man. I think from
what a combine too
perspective, yes. And it shows on tape. And to me, the difference between him and Brian Thomas Jr. is just the confidence that they run routes with. He knows how to run routes. He's so loose, man. He is not crisp and precise. And if you can get him, kind of light a fire under him and get him to have some precision in his route running ability, I mean, he's right up there with Odunze and Marvin Harrison Jr. in terms of like outside X wide receivers and what he can do. I watched him against, the Alabama duo, Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry, the 2 corners there. Yeah. And he put on a show at the line of scrimmage. If he doesn't want to be touched, he won't be. And that's unique for a guy who's like 6'4", 210. He really ticks all the boxes physically. It's just how bad does he want the sort of technical aspects of his game to be at an NFL caliber.
Wow, that's big right there. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. We got a couple more questions for you, and we'll let you get out of here. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, just give you the scenario, right? All right, so 2 years go by, and we're back here. You're coming on my podcast, right? Who will be the better NFC North quarterback, Jordan Love or Caleb Williams? This is 2 years down the road, so 2 years. Okay. Who's better?
Gosh, you're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
Because I'm a massive Packers fan, and you know this. But I think I'm going to lean Caleb Williams. I do think that 2 years is probably – year 2 is probably when you start to see the light switch flip on to where he is, probably going to be in the MVP conversation. For as much as I love Jordan Love, I've said that like a zillion times, love Jordan Love, and I hate every time I say it. But as much as I think he's a darn good quarterback, I worry if he's accurate enough to really be that, in that tier 1. Whereas I don't worry about that with Caleb Williams. So I think Love probably settles into that tier 2 of kind of, franchise quarterbacks in the NFL, or whatever tier you want that's behind like Burrow, Allen, those guys, Herbert, those guys. I think he settles into that like Dak tier, which is great. But I think Caleb Williams can join that tier 1.
I'm with you right there. And unfortunately, I think that it's pretty clear that the Packers, unfortunately for me, fortunately for you, but I think it's pretty clear the Packers have done it again. Yep. But you see right there that what happens to a quarterback when you give him time and you stick to it. You come in with a plan, you stick to it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you have to – the thing they did not do with Justin Fields, they have learned their lesson. And why I say, pick 9, you want the wide receiver. It's just give him every single chance to possibly succeed before his rookie contract ends.
And people saying, I hear this a lot, why would it matter if he has the weapons now? Here's the thing. You start forming bad habits. If you go in and you're throwing the ball to nobody that can really get open, now you're going in there, you're not trusting your receivers, and you're building these habits, and it really changes the way you play the game. So now when you do get a better group of receivers, you got these ingrained feelings where you're not trusting the plays, trusting the system, because you're playing a specific way. Your first years in the league, X amount of games where you don't have the right people around you, which affects the way you play. And it can have long-term effects. And I think we've seen it. And I know the argument is, oh, well, now we had a solid group last year. And last year, I think, Justin Fields still had a lack of talent around him. And I think this year, Caleb, they've done a much better job, obviously, bringing in Everett as the tight end. You know, Shane Waldron loves a 2 tight end set. So we got Everett, then you're bringing in Keenan with DJ Moore, and then Cole Kmet's coming into his own, and you still got the solid running backs with Roshan and Khalil Herbert, but now you got Swift. So I think this is really good. I wanted to ask you if you know anything about these 2 centers, because I've seen them play, Ryan Bates and Coleman Shelton. Those are the 2 guys that look to be competing for the Bears center job. What do you think about, are these starting caliber guys? I'm not as familiar as these guys as I should be.
I would call them like placeholder starters. There's a bunch of those around the NFL where you're not going to, you know, if you're sending them out week 1 in the NFL, you're not going to be like, oh man, what are we doing here? But you're also, if you're sitting there, and I believe the Bears still have their 3rd rounder, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. If you're sitting there and one of those like nice centers, it's a nice center class, is on the board, you're more than willing to take that pick. So I do think that's how I feel about those 2.
Yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson. All right, Mike, appreciate you, man. We got one more for you. Before we let you go, it's draft night, number 9. What does your gut tell you that will happen for the Chicago Bears?
Man, it's tough. I think my gut says they end up going defensive line. I would like to be wrong, but I think we see a run on those wideouts. I think they're too good. I think they get kind of left at the door. And I think someone like the Jets could get aggressive behind them to want to go get one of those wideouts because of where they stand as a roster. And then they'll be happy to pick like a Jared Verse. I could see them going at number 9, or even Dallas Turner falling to them. So I think they go one of the edge class.
And we both got the same gut feeling, but appreciate you, Mike. Got some really good insight. I know everybody from Chicago is going to appreciate that. Tell everybody where to find you on social media and follow your stuff.
Yeah, find me on social media at Mike Renner _. And if you want to tune in to the Bleacher Report draft show, I will be on that day 1 with CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons. So it'll be a fun time.
Oh, wow. That's huge, man. I'm gonna be watching that for sure. I did the free agency frenzy over there with Chris Harris Jr. at Bleacher Report. Make sure to watch that. Make sure to follow Mike on all social media accounts. This guy's got some good stuff, and we will talk to you soon, Mike. Appreciate it.
For sure, Clyde. Thanks for having me.
Later.